God, I have great boobles. Anyway.
Welcome to the Christmas special of the Nerd Citadel. We're going to be talking about the most important thing around Christmas, Star Wars.
Star Wars Rise of the Spaceman.
Skywalker.
You would say, yeah, whatever. Live long and prosper. So we just got back from seeing Star Wars Episode IX, Rise of Skywalker, and we want to give our thoughts in a non-spoiler review this time. Give all you beautiful winter snow bunnies out there a chance to go see the movie before we really dig in and talk about the things we loved or didn't love or feel indifferent about. And I think that just about covers what I have to say at the moment.
So, supposedly this is the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. So we're hoping going forward we'll be seeing different areas of the Star Wars universe. Maybe some Jedi stuff, but maybe something completely new and different.
Right, and you know what? I think it's a good idea to kind of end this story thread. Now, if this were still the 70s, 80s, or even the prequel trilogy, I would say, I think there's still a little Skywalker stuff to talk about. Stuff with the Empire, stuff with the Rebellion, but I feel like this movie actually does do a good job at closing that story out. Well, at the same time, we've had nine, direct storyline movies and a handful of spin-offs, be them Solo and Rogue One, or shows like the Clone Wars and Rebels and any other show that I might have missed, that have really fleshed out an enormous universe for Lucasfilm and Disney to explore. So I feel like this is kind of a fitting close to the story of Luke and Anakin Skywalker.
So we're going to start by ranking the latest installment in Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker, from 1 to 10. Nick, where do you stand?
9.
I'm at about a 9 as well, maybe a 9.25.
I'm going to be the odd man out. I'm going to say it's about a 6.5.
That low.
That low, and I'll get into it in a spoiler-free way. When we talk about this film, I feel like 'tis the season to be merry and joyous. So on my end, I guess you guys are gonna have some questions since I'm ranking it so low. Why? But let me first talk about the things that I liked. One, this is probably the best looking of all the Star Wars films. This movie was drop dead gorgeous to watch. 2, it was entertaining start to finish. There was not a boring moment in this. 3, I actually liked the characters a lot more in this than I did in previous films. I don't like I put an asterisk next to that because I don't like all of their actions and motivations, but I like the characters and how they are characterized. Like Rey and Ren in this movie have never been more raw, unadulterated badasses as they were in this movie. Like, they were just wailing on dudes back and forth like savages, and I honestly loved every moment of the action, including lightsaber battles between the two of them, were really good, well choreographed. That's kind of something that J.J. Abrams has shown he's able to do from what we saw in Episode 7. Really well choreographed melee fights. I feel like Rey was probably the strongest characterized that she has been thus far. And this movie actually made me like Kylo Ren more. Mm-hmm. If the first one made me go, oh, this is an interesting villain, I kind of dig this. Episode 8 made me like, all right, whatever, My Chemical Romance. In this one, I was like, bruh, you are a freaking savage. But that also has an asterisk next to it because I feel like some of his actions going into the end of the film were, in a way, they kind of brought his story full circle.
Skirting really close to spoiler details right now.
Well, I'm not gonna say what happens. I'm gonna say that when they did happen, I was thinking to myself, yeah, this brings it full circle, but I feel like they're not treading it correctly. There was a payoff to something that was never built up. There was a payoff with no build up at the end of the film. That made me kind of go back a little bit on how much I liked him up until this point. But my major issue with this film comes down to not the plot itself. The plot itself is bananas.
We'll start with going through the strong points first, and then we'll come back and go through the...
All right. So continuing on things that I liked. So we had the way certain characters behaved for a majority of the run film. The script was okay. I don't have too many complaints with the script. My complaints come more in the pacing and certain story beats. I felt like there were probably only a little more fan service moments in this film than other ones, but I feel like they were so dwelled on that it kind of took me out of the moment. Yeah, I'm out of the strong stuff. I'm out of the stuff that I like, and I'm moving into the things that I don't like.
My first positive I don't know if you call it positive critique, but my first positive comment on the movie, actually I want to start by saying, just because I want to see a reaction on camera, I've been staving off saying this because I wanted to make sure we caught it here. This is hands down my favorite Star Wars movie, period.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
And you're entitled to your opinion.
It's about to Hulk out of there.
But it actually, and I had a feeling that it would be, starting with the crawl, actually. The crawl was my issue. A lot of my issues with the crawls in the past was that they were too convoluted and gave too much of a background of what happened in between episodes. This was very straightforward, straight to the point, told you exactly where it was going. And when we get to the negatives, you can say what I see you're going to say. But for now...
Okay.
But and I think, especially given that JJ left from 7 to 8, between 7 and 8, and Rian Johnson took over. I think he did.
Abrams did the best that he could to kind of bring things back on track.
He did an extreme. If you didn't know that somebody else took over for 8, I think it would run, and you just watch the 3 back to back, I think it would seem pretty fluid.
I can't fully say that I agree, but the three films together, like or hate them, do make a fairly cohesive story. About as cohesive as any of the trilogies. It's just, I like, the way I see it is it taking prequel trilogy, original trilogy, sequel trilogy. All three of them have a lot of dumb shit in them. It's what do we give a pass to? Because I think Star Wars overall is, well, one, it's one of the earliest films I've ever seen, and it holds a special place in my heart. I think that there's goofy shit in all of them, or something that warrants criticism. It's just, how is it portrayed? How do you receive it? And, when is it happening?
But another one of my, I think the best attributes of the film, though, was that this is the first one where I think all the goofy shit that's there feels like it was intended to be goofy.
Yes, I will give it
It was very
that.
self-aware.
I'll give it some of that. I feel like there were a couple of goofy moments that were not intended to be goofy. There were some very serious moments in this film that I laughed at. That I sat in my chair and was just like...
And also, even though 7 was probably the one where characters from the original trilogy got the most screen time. Well, I'm not even just going to say characters. I'm going to say actors from the original trilogy got the most screen time. This one, to me, felt the most naturally a part of that original series.
Can't fully say I agree. I get what you're saying. I don't... I was seeing things a little differently during this, and I don't want to say you're right or I'm right or you're wrong or I'm wrong. It's the whole divisive Star Wars thing. Oh God, I need to breathe. I think this, I feel like if you're a fan, if you're like one of the diehard OT purists, you're probably not going to like this film very much. If you can come into this with an open mind and at least liked episode 7, you can have a good time with this film. If you're the kind of person that loved 7 and 8, you're probably really going to love this one.
This one definitely had the most... They all have a lot of nostalgia, but this one I felt like had the most well-deserved nostalgic moments. And some of the beats that... Well, a lot of the beats I definitely expected to see, but I felt like they were handled much better than I would have expected them to be.
Okay.
So that boosted the movie. So I might feel a little bit different tomorrow. It might no longer be my favorite Star Wars movie, but it definitely exceeded my expectations.
Gotcha. And you know what?
And that right now kind of makes it my favorite Star Wars movie.
I will 100% say, right here on the Nerd Citadel, this movie, from all the leaks stuff that was let out and all like the early reviews, I don't disagree with all of them, but this is nowhere near as bad as they made it seem. This exceeded expectations, and like I said, I was entertained throughout. Like, it really, if you want to be able to switch your brain off for a little bit and just enjoy some Star Wars, you can do that with this. But yeah.
I felt that a lot of the, especially the original trilogy, were too drawn out, too slow. This one, I know you felt like it moved too fast, but I felt like it kept moving fast enough for me to stay interested the whole time. I never felt bored, and this is the first Star Wars movie ever that I've never felt bored.
Gotcha. And yeah, there's definitely a plotting to the original trilogy. But I also feel like that that pacing of the original trilogy, and some people might disagree with me, that was also a product of its time. So that's where I give the pacing of that a little bit of a pass. I do feel like the story in this, especially in the first act, which I say arguably the first act is the most important act of a film. To get you invested in what's going to happen. So that even if there are missteps after the first act, you can still stay invested in the story that was set up. I feel like this movie started halfway through another movie. And it spent a lot of time in the first act explaining things that either didn't need to be explained or that we didn't see in order to have a point of reference.
But Star Wars has always been, starting with the original trilogy, starting with the fourth movie in a series, has always been about being
But
based
that wasn't
in a world.
what it was when it was released. It wasn't Episode 4 when it was released. It was
but it was
just Star Wars.
No, but when it was released, George Lucas, maybe he didn't know he was going to go back, but he always knew he was starting it in the middle of a story.
Right.
And so Star Wars has always been about making it feel like it's in a world that was already there before we ever knew what Star Wars was.
Oh, absolutely.
And I felt like this respected that and continued that tradition.
And I understand that. I feel like, yes, they did that, but I feel like they didn't handle it as good as they could have. Especially because there are a lot of just details thrown at you in this first act. Things about, like, stuff Luke was doing or stuff this other character was doing. In characters that we've seen in the previous two films. And don't use the time skip to excuse this, because when a narrative says, when a gun appears in the first act, it has to be used. This is firing the gun we didn't know was there.
Yeah, but
and it's part of setup and payoff, narrative structure of story writing.
but I prefer the writers, at least when I read something or when I watch something, I prefer to feel like the writers assumed that I'm more intelligent than I am, than I'm dumb as a sack of bricks. You know what I mean? You ever watch something and you feel like they're just spoon-feeding me the story? I'm okay.
Yeah, but this movie did that too. It both spoon-fed and expected you to know things you could not possibly know.
Yes. So it fell somewhere in between.
Except the things it was spoon-feeding had some of them had nothing to do with the things they just expected you to know. And when they did, they spoon-fed you information that directly contradicts the previous two films.
None of the things that they spoon-fed, none of the things that they expected you to know, I felt were so important that it ruined the movie not knowing how they got there.
And that I can give it. I think probably one of the biggest things that I had an issue with, going just along these lines.
Before we continue with the issues, why don't we let Nick have a voice, because I see his mouth stuck open.
Oh, hey guys, Nick is still here.
You guys covered.
Speak up.
You guys covered a lot, and I'm going to first expand on some things that you've already said, and then go into others. So, ranking. I say 9. I'm going to start with strong points. 4 through 6, the original trilogy, had a charisma to them that just
Oliver, what are you doing?
lured you in, not like the episodes 1 through 3.
Right.
Episodes 1 through 3 had the visuals that you wished 4 through 6 had. Right?
Right.
7 through 9 pulled in a little bit of that charisma and then gave you that visuals that you wish you had.
Right.
And I felt like that really tied together beautifully in episode 9. Episode 9 definitely shined with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they never used CG in this movie where practical effects could be used more effectively.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, hey, real quick before you continue, that made me think of something. So, the island, I forget the planet name, the island that Luke had been on in episode 8 that is briefly revisited in this film. the Porgs were made kind of on a whim, because the island that these movies were shot on are a native home to the species of bird puffins. And by law on this island, the country that this island is part of, I think it's Ireland, isn't it?
I have no idea.
I forget.
No,
I think it's.
I think it's based. I want to say it was based in Scotland.
Well, either way, whatever island it was, whatever country that island belonged to, it was illegal for the camera people and the production staff to physically move the puffins. So they're like, we need some kind of puppet to kind of like block people's view. And then that idea just took a life of its own, and Porgs were born. Because they were originally started put in like various shots to hide the puffins that were behind them. But anyway, continue what you were saying. I'm sorry. You talked about how it took the charisma of the original trilogy, the visual stunningness of the prequel
And then I said
trilogy.
Right.
no CGI was used where practical effects could be used.
Right. And it avoided the campiness of episodes 4 through 6, which wasn't present in, or as present in 1 through 3. But going further into character development, like you were saying with Kylo, I definitely liked him better in 9, but like 7 through 8, he kind of felt, like I didn't even want to, if I could sit there and talk to Kylo, I wouldn't even talk to him, because he was just too much like Anakin, his grandfather,
And not like Clone
He was
Wars
just
Anakin.
No,
We're talking
like-
like prequel Anakin, just whiny.
yeah, just whiny, like it's not fair, like
It's not fair. The Jedi need to die. It's not fair.
This one felt more like an Adam Driver performance.
Yes,
Yeah.
because Adam Driver's an actual good actor.
Mm-hmm.
like his actions set aside, the way that he is in this movie, I would actually have a conversation with Kylo if he was sitting in front of me right now.
Right. You get a lot more of the duality of his character in this, and his ultimate choice to do things. So,
You might want to cut that part out.
he does things.
And we know he has the duality.
Yeah.
So, it's all good. I lost my train of thought again. You guys continue on to something else, and then I'll chime in when I get it back.
Okay, the first sign that I thought, this is not going to be my favorite Star Wars film, is actually the first thing you liked about it, and that was the title crawl. The first sentence of the title crawl, I was like, oh no. Oh no. This is, like, Star Wars has always been like a space fantasy, like a space odyssey kind of deal. This title crawl, the title crawl in this one, felt like it was taken from a fairy tale.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
They all do, though.
Not really. Now, granted, okay, there's a fine line to tread, because you can either keep it with the semi-camp and the semi-fantasy stuff that a lot of the crawls in the original trilogy had, which they weren't perfect, but they did their job. They were pretty short, concise, let you know what was going on, and then dropped you into the world. Mm-hmm. The prequel trilogy was a little too wordy and had too much of the boring stuff that was going on in that world, then dropped you in to live in that boring world. Episode 7 was alright. Episode 7's title crawl was pretty good. Episode 8, from what I remember of the title crawl, was not terrible. This one, I did not like the title crawl. Now, granted, it followed through on everything it set up. And I think it's no surprise, and it's not a spoiler from all the posters and material that are out there, that, Sheev Palpatine is back. And honestly, I thought I was going to hate him, but he was absolutely the exact emperor that he was in Return of the Jedi. And that made me so happy. Like, and yeah, he had some of the character traits that were established in the prequels, but he was so much of this is the Emperor that was thrown down a hole.
I'll tell you what, though, I had a lot of a Voldemort feel from him.
Me and Nick were both saying on the drive back that we felt a lot of Harry Potter in this.
You know what? I think that's where a lot of the fairy tale stuff for me comes in. Granted, and I'm not saying that to slam Harry Potter, but there's a certain ebb and flow to like those stories where the fairy tale stuff works a little better. And I think, and this is my problem with kind of the whole sequel trilogy, but this supposed to be
the conclusion.
The conclusion. Yeah. I feel like it's so much more apparent to me that these movies don't adhere to the rules of their own universe from movie to movie. It's not just a change in the status quo or a change in narrative structure. It's there. I feel like there are rules and ideas that are set up, like fuel being introduced 8 movies into the series. You know, and it's little things you could see. And yes, I will absolutely go and say these are probably nitpicks. But I feel like when you're 9 movies into the mainline story and you're still either breaking rules as far as, you know, how ships fly and things like that, or the capabilities of certain characters and pieces of equipment, you're still breaking those rules, you know, I feel like it looks cool. All that stuff, and you guys know what I'm talking about, looked really awesome. It was visually awesome. But then in the back of my head, my logical brain started thinking and started going, this was not possible 2 movies ago. This wasn't possible 3 movies ago. Why is it all of a sudden possible now? You know, especially because it's pretty established that yeah, technology is advanced in this universe, but it hasn't advanced that much.
Well, and I will say, going back to one of the few negative feelings that I have about it was that there were things, going back to the whole idea of spoon feeding, there were things that were spoon fed that absolutely didn't have to be. There was one thing in particular.
First act, second act, or third act?
First act. There was one thing in the first act regarding a certain main character that absolutely anybody coming into this could have already assumed enough that there was no reason to spoon feed it.
I think I know what you're talking about, but you'll have to clarify once we're off camera.
Okay.
What character was it?
I'm not going to say.
Oh, okay. That'll give away too much. Okay.
Yeah.
There's another thing, and this is another one. This isn't spoiler territory. Everyone knows that they used footage of Carrie Fisher in this film. Now, granted, they were using footage
from the 8th movie.
From the 8th movie, either unused footage or slightly altered footage. And I get it. They wanted it to be a send off for the character of Leia. The problem is you could really tell it was distracting.
There was a few where it was clearly cut together, and then there were a few scenes that were clearly the entire scene was fit into this movie.
Right, yeah. It's one of those things, like, especially because, like, she would not respond to a single thing anyone said. And if she did respond in some way, it sounded like she was responding to a completely different statement, question, or sentence. And it's like, on one end, I'm like, I want to give credit where it's due. And on the other end, I'm like, but this is really distracting. But it pulled me out of the movie.
But the real part that was a dead giveaway was whether or not her and the other characters she was talking to were shown in the same shot.
Oh, yeah, that... yeah, well, okay, and that's where... And I'm sure
and
a
I'm
lot
not going
of...
to say which characters, but...
Right, and I'm sure a lot of folks could guess this. There's a lot of that weird, like, reverse shot thing.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be, like, Leia's on screen, she... Half the time she doesn't even speak. They just got footage of her making a face.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would snap pan, or not even pan.
Yeah.
Just snap to someone else and, like, the back of Leia's head superimposed in front of them. And I was like, it's like, I give credit for trying. And it is, I don't even want to say, because for me, this was not a good send-off for Leia.
But it was clearly the send-off, I think, was planned before her death.
Oh, absolutely. This was the logical conclusion for Princess Leia.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they rewrote the story at all.
No, they took what they had to try and make it work. And I think the character got the send-off they deserve, but it wasn't executed as good as it could have been because of Carrie Fisher's unfortunate passing. So they did the best with what they could, but it sucked because when we get to these, big emotional moments that involve her character and her relationships, I felt nothing until one other character reacts to them. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the most, for a character that isn't fully, understandable or coherent most of the time, it was one of the most moving performances of the film, and I teared up a little bit.
Well, one of the things I loved the most was that where the hell was I going with this? Go ahead. I don't have it yet.
So
go.
I got something. Towards the end, you know how with movies in the series they always try to go bigger and better.
Yes.
And you're just like, well, you don't always need that. But the scale that they got to with this is like something that I really, really have been wanting to see in Star Wars because
it felt good.
Could be.
It felt very good.
It was great. And the fact that it happened in episode 9, which is why that my biggest problem with episode 9 is that I really liked it to the point that I wanted more.
You felt it was too short?
It was like it made you want more, and it's the end of the series.
Gotcha. You finally feel like they hit a certain stride with what they could pull off, and it's like, oh, by the way, the end, bye.
Yeah.
And I know what you're talking about, and you know what it was for me? It elicited a little bit of that nostalgia of how I felt as a child watching the third act of Return of the Jedi. Because, much like a lot of recent Star Wars media, Episode 8 excluded, how they like to pull a little inspiration from the earlier films and pay a little fan service. The third act of this film borrowed incredibly heavy from Return of the Jedi. And not in a bad way, because it was a lot of different stakes. And that's something that J.J. Abrams does really well. Paying homage to a sequence or quote-unquote ripping off a sequence, but flipping the emotional stake of it.
Actually, you just reminded me by mentioning JJ. That's the thing that I wanted to mention, was that JJ did... we all know that there was a lot of, and we've talked about it on the show, there was a lot of FUJJ movies, or moments by Ryan Johnson's installment. And
this movie is full of F.U. Johnson moments.
yes, and he executed his F.U. Johnson moments a hell of a lot better than Ryan Johnson executed his F.U. J.J.
Well, that's because J.J. Abrams knows how to direct a film. Not that Ryan Johnson can't direct a film. He can't direct Star Wars, was his thing. There are a lot of movies, there are a lot of stories out there where Ryan Johnson's approach could actually work. I think he just picked the wrong franchise to
it was
do
like
it
when, in episode 8 when Admiral Hodo, just some of the ways I guess he directed the special effects to be done. When Admiral Hodo takes the ship, takes the ship.
Admiral Hodor
takes the ship.
Holdo
takes the ship into light drive right through the Imperial ships.
Yep.
Oh, I love that moment.
That was actually a beautiful moment.
It was, but the way it was done artistically did not fit into Star Wars at all.
No,
it looks like a Kill Bill, like the way it was cut. Looked like it was taken out of Kill Bill.
Yes. And I think it's really weird because just thinking of that moment for a second, because I guess I feel like it's one of the few things from that movie that JJ didn't give an F.U. Johnson moment to. Because, and this isn't really a spoiler because this is something that happened in the previous movie, but another character references what Admiral Holdo did in this film. They're like, oh, well, we should be pulling Holdo maneuvers. And someone else is like, oh, that's a 1 in a million shot. You can't just try that on everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was like the only not outright F.U. Johnson moment.
Yeah, but
but on the other end, I feel like they don't want to show a lot of... They don't want people to think that they can just do that in that universe, because that's another thing that's kind of breaking the rules of Star Wars, because light speed is kind of not something you're able to... in that universe, they say you can't really do it around large bodies.
Yeah.
Because you'll tear your ship apart and part of the planet you're trying to go by, or whatever it is, if it's small enough. And also, I think, now this might be extended universe stuff, but it's almost like hyperspace is like almost like a pocket, like a black hole kind of deal. Like a warp kind of deal. It's not just moving fast. It's almost like you're jumping from one point to another. So I feel like there's like this weird... It doesn't outright break any rules, but it's something that's like, if that was so possible, wouldn't like a bunch of rebellion fighters have tried that shit on the Death Star?
But that wasn't even my issue with it. My issue with it was the artistic rendering of the moment.
Yes.
Because you ever see in old kung fu movies when they have that shadow fight sequence?
Yes,
that's what it looks like.
Yes, it was so not with the style of the film. Now, granted, I thought the sequence was beautiful, but it's not...
It was just like, one of these things doesn't belong.
Yeah, it's one of these things is not like the others. And in that is where I go back to JJ being like, JJ kind of understands Star Wars. He gave us all the audiovisual beats that we wanted to see. I feel like the movie did have a little bit of the suffering that big movies can endure after movies like Infinity War and Endgame, in which they feel like they need to move so fast and convey so much. And I feel like that's where this movie missteps. Like I said, the first act, there's so much jumping around that I felt like it didn't give me time to breathe and take in the moments. And it's hard even now for me to like think about them because they happen so fast. I don't even remember a lot of them. I feel like they don't give most viewers a chance to really take in the scene before jumping to the next point. And they do so with a couple of the characters introduced in this movie. They kind of rush through them a little much. There's the one character that we're introduced to about halfway through that Poe Dameron knows that gets like zero characterization, but they give us just enough to be like, man, who is this person? Yeah. But then there's so much else going on that they're trying to shove at you that this character kind of gets pushed to the side.
But I have a feel, and there's a few other characters. I have a feeling there's a few characters in this that they want to explore outside of their relationship with the Star Wars saga.
Right.
And there's one other character in particular that they made it very clear they're going to be doing that.
Oh, yes. There is. And I feel like they handled that little bait in the hook better than they did this character that I'm referencing. Only because that character, it just sounds like, as far as this movie's concerned, that character got the conclusion to their story. Mm-hmm. You know, they're gonna find whatever. They're gonna do whatever that they want to do. With this other character, it's like they keep shoving it at us to the point where we're like, oh, this person is important, I guess. They're important to someone. They're important to something. But then they kind of get pushed off to the side. Yeah. And that also comes with, just the hyper fast pacing of this film. One thing I did forget to mention that I actually like about this movie, I feel like this is the first Star Wars movie that I've watched where I actually see the stormtroopers as the threats that the characters keep saying they are.
Stormtroopers have much better aim in this movie.
Yeah. And they didn't have horrible aim in Episode 7 either. They were like kind of barely there. But they were all over Episode 7 and 8, but like they felt more like background fixtures. In this, I feel like the stormtroopers actually had weight and a military presence that they hadn't had before. Because how many movies have we had that had stormtroopers in them where they're like, oh man, these are elite Imperial forces. Oh, they are this. It goes, the OT kind of made them pretty incompetent. They were in the prequel trilogy for like 2 minutes as clone troopers. Episode 7 and 8 made them douchebags, but not like a real threat. Clone Wars and Rebels made them buffoons. This movie, I was like, oh man, they're like kicking people to the ground. They're like ruthless.
Yeah.
And they fly now, so.
But I think we're starting to run very long for our non-spoiler video, so we should probably start to wrap it up. But Nick, you haven't had a whole lot of input, so any last words?
You guys got everything. Stole right out of my mouth.
It's all right. I'll put it right back in your mouth.
Please don't. Please don't.
All right. Your closing statements, Chris?
Well, why don't you go? You have anything left to say?
I guess nothing major. This movie, I feel like the script was one revision away from being great.
Okay.
I feel like it just left a couple of things. There were a couple of it needed a little dusting off. That this movie was the closest to being both unique and paying major tribute to the previous trilogies. So I guess how I would describe it: Star Wars, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. It's kind of like drunk sex. It seems really good in the moment, but neither one of you actually climaxed.
But the next morning, do you remember whether or not you climaxed? So you might feel better about it in the morning.
That's Star Wars Episode 9. We'll see how I feel in the morning once I wake up. And you know what? I mean, I guess, and probably this is both, some people are going to see this as a negative, but I see this as an absolute win for Star Wars. The best way for me to describe all the things that I disliked and liked, other than not being able to come during sex, is this story is completely insane. It is completely off its rocker bananas. There are so many random things thrown in there, including my least favorite moment towards the end, and maybe a couple new force powers that were never established ever.
Okay, I can tell you that every force power presented in this movie has been established.
Where?
I'm not going to say because then I will spoil something.
Gotcha.
But every force power in this movie has been established in canon.
Okay, then maybe there's something I missed, and that's fine.
Am I
I'm
correct
open
with that?
if there's something I missed, then I'm open to being educated.
I do believe every force power in this movie has at least been mentioned that it is possible.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Actually, wait, no, I do take it back. I don't like the employment of it and how it comes out of nowhere, but it was established in the movies, and I will tell
Yes.
you why once we're out of
I know why.
Zone.
once we're out of the spoiler-free zone. I'll
Okay.
tell you the revelation. So, anyway, folks,
The producer's telling us we're going too long.
Hold on. Don't sign out. I got a few last words.
He's nervous.
Say it now while he's paused.
So I just want to throw out, if we haven't already, our Crisis on Infinite Earths video, because I'm not sure what order they'll get posted in. Our Crisis on Infinite Earths
it'll
video
be up shortly. I'm
will
a
be up
busy boy.
around the time of this one. And also we will be getting to, I know I'm late on the Watchmen review. This has been a busy week for us because I think we're going to end up with like 4 videos we filmed this week. But
I'm going to be busy.
so that will eventually be coming as well. Thoughts on both, actually all interpretations of the Watchmen will be getting posted. And yet to come is Chris. No, yet to come is
We have to do a Witcher review at some point.
Witcher. Yes,
I'm gonna start.
I started it this morning.
Yeah, I should watch. I know you were watching that
it's
earlier.
so good. It's so good.
I'll check it out.
They have broken the video game curse.
I will check it out.
Although I don't know if it counts.
It's based off the books.
I was gonna say I don't know if it counts because it
Based off the
was.
books.
Yeah, but it was the video games that popularized it. Anyway, if you see Star Wars Rise of Skywalker and you love it, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you see it and you hate it, please subscribe, comment, and like.
If you see it and are completely indifferent about it, well then I guess you're just not a real Star Wars fan. Why don't you tell us how you feel about that
And
statement
why'd you even click on
in
the video?
comments?
It clearly said review of Rise of Skywalker. So why did you click on the video if you don't like Star Wars?
Yeah,
So
well-
the real problem is you, not us.
Yeah, if you think that you're just entitled to to your opinion and you can go onto these videos and just trash talk, why don't you like, comment, and subscribe on this video? Be sure to smash that bell for notifications about more videos that you're gonna hate. So guys, this is Chris, and other guy signing off. Nick.
I was just gonna go with other guy for the rest of the videos.
Anyway.
Your bow tie's falling off.
Anyway, guys, whatever holiday you're celebrating, if any, have an awesome one, and stay warm, nerds.